Now, terrorism and terrorists have existed throughout history in all countries. You know, you get the idea when I talk to kind of everyday folks that it's an Islamic phenomenon. But in fact, it has existed in all historical eras, in essentially all countries, in essentially all religions. A terrorist act that occurs somewhere in the United States, it's a white supremacist act, usually stays very contained and does not get the support of the broad population. So the key question becomes, what is it in these Middle Eastern countries that causes the broader population to respond and support terrorists? And the answer is, as you look at all the instances of terrorism, whether it's over the last 50 years or if you extend back centuries and include Russia in the early 20th century and the Bolshevik Revolution, Napoleon in Spain in the early 1800s, and dozens of other examples, the answer is there are two things that cause a broad population to empathize with and in some cases go so far as to support terrorists: occupation and oppression. But the commonality between oppression and occupation is, in both cases, the people are deprived of a participation in government. And the basic obligations of government to the governed are not fulfilled. The most central of these always ends up being the enforcement of property rights, but is closely followed by things like safety, education, access to opportunity, and the like. And in the post-industrial age, when the broad population is not allowed to participate in government, does not have enforcement of property rights, the inevitable results are poverty and despair, which are in fact the things that make a population receptive to alternative choices. The best way to address terrorism is by addressing the situations of oppression or occupation. In Peru, in the 1980s and 1990s, there was, as you all know, the Shining Path terrorist group who was regularly blowing up buildings and killing people and initiating military attacks. The Shining Path essentially isn't around today. And one of the biggest parts of the equation in solving the issue was the property rights reform that occurred in Peru. So whether it's in case of oppression or occupation, these things must be replaced by distributed power, by what we would call democracy. And of course, this is what the Bush administration has said. They've said, you know, we need democracy. Democracy is the solution. We agree with that. However, democracy cannot move forward. The distribution or decentralization of power cannot move forward unless it is accompanied by the simultaneous and equally vigorous distribution of economic opportunities. It's what all of us want. What people want is to be able to hang out with their kids, to love, to succeed, to matter, to have respect. That's what people want. Going forward, you know, it seems to us that the very fact that so much hope was pinned to the surge strategy really underscores that people are thinking of Iraq as a military problem, and it is not. You know, we believe that the whole issue must be approached holistically. There are 45 nations that are predominantly Muslim. We believe if you had $1 trillion, you know, some folks estimate this war is going to cost $1 trillion, some folks $2 trillion. If you had $1 trillion, and if it were 2002, and somebody said, reduce terrorism, make things better in the Middle East, We would argue that the better deployment of that capital, or some subpart of that capital, would have been to make things better, move countries like Turkey or Morocco or Indonesia or others forward on these two central issues of decentralization of power and decentralization of economic opportunity. Every success in one of these countries positively influences the other 44.